Hello, welcome back to the Bald Book Geek. My name is Will and I am the host of this weird little thing on the internet. Book Twitter, as we know, is a cesspit. It's a church built over a sewer. I saw this tweet by a well-known booktuber that made me laugh my head off. I wish new adult was a more popular genre of fantasy. I feel like fantasy authors could really push some boundaries, plus we could normalise sex in fantasy, because I know that would be good. I'm not under 18, so YA isn't for me when it comes to sex and other things. It's called adult fantasy. New adult and that whole thing didn't exist. New adult was people legitimising them wanting to read adult books but not wanting to alienate the YA readers and still kind of stay within the reading bubble. It was also a marketing ploy by publishers. Second, it's called adult fantasy for a reason. Thirdly, this person is a representation of everything wrong within the book community online. They admit they don't read the books that they get, they just skim and read dialogue. They have no comprehension and their ignorance is astonishing. They're also known for being a bully and harassing people online. The difference between adult and YA fantasy is that YA fantasy is character driven. It's focused on shallow Lego brick characters which are designed for you to project yourself on. Oh my god guys, I'm so relatable. That is it. Usually a love story and it's the me against the world narrative. The fantasy setting, the background character is just a skin for the story, nothing deeper. Adult fantasy, on the other hand, does something different. Adult fantasy, not just the characters, but it also uses the world, the politics, and the narration of the world around it. Adult fantasy is far more sophisticated and far more interesting than any YA fantasy that's ever been. YA fantasy is just pulp fiction for the masses. So, with this list, here are a selection of adult fantasy novels you need to read. The first book on the list I want to talk about is Marlon James's Black Leopard, Red Wolf. A spanning, brilliant, epic fantasy that is based on African myth and legend. What was funny is when this came out, there was a lot of drama around it. It got picked up by the YA set, who didn't understand or comprehend the book. I did laugh at a Goodreads review when this person was moaning about the vulgarity in the book, when what they read is quite BDSM romance. Oh dear, honey. Jessica, you're an idiot. The whole book is this beautiful, sprawling, big fantasy. A lot going on, characters, intertwining plots, the character arcs, it's just phenomenal. It's a fantasy novel that not only will get under your skin, it will keep you reading. It's beautiful. It's one of the best fantasy novels I've read in many years. It's a shame that there isn't more like this. I love this style of big political fantasy and warring kingdoms, and I have an obsession with Africana and the African myths and legends. Actually, any myths and legends of other cultures I'm obsessed with. You should see my library on those. This book is stunning, epic, and big, and definitely worth reading. This book will have you reading and reading and reading. You will not be able to put it down. It's an interesting and powerful book. Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This is political fantasy. This is a political story of warring Europe set against the tides of the Middle Ages. This is a spectacular and brilliant series. Is it particularly well written and does it fall down in places? Yes. Is it enjoyable? Yes. There is a lot going on and a lot to take in. A lot of character arcs and stories. The series is not finished yet, by the way, but you also have the characters that just intertwine. The characters intertwine and pull you in. The story carries on all the way through. Each character has their own arc, their own moments. It's dense, it's heavy going, but it's brilliant. I love the audiobooks of Game of Thrones, by the way. They're definitely worth checking out. Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, is a modern fantasy. The politics of the world is paramount. It's warring kingdoms, it's people, personal troubles. A lot of history from Europe and across the Middle East and the ancient world pops up as well. You'll find this really interesting because you won't be able to put it down. This is a stunning, stunning series. Is it the best fantasy? No. Is it interesting? Yes. Do check out Game of Thrones, just because I think it will offer something different. And also, the illustrated editions are rather pretty. The Darkness That Come Before. Book 1 of The Prince of Nothing. The Prince of Nothing is one of my favourite fantasy series, and one that doesn't get much love online. This is a journey unlike any other. I would put it up there with things like epic, big Lord of the Rings, but it's also sort of this post-apocalyptic feel as well. You have to imagine a world where the post-apocalypse has happened, and everything's kind of falling apart around them. A holy war in a land of infidels and exiled barbarians. It's big. It's so big. I've inhaled every single one of these books and love them all. They are stunning and wholeheartedly recommended for good fantasy. They are big and dense and a lot to take in. They are not necessarily the easiest reads. They are there to challenge you as a reader, like reading should. Art should challenge you, where most people are quite happy with their comfort zone. These are wordy and powerful, and I remember inhaling every single one of them. R. Scott Baker has done several series, basically, from standalones to full-blown trilogies and other series, and the book one, The Darkness That Come Before, is stunning, The Warrior Prophet, and then you go through. This book will keep you reading, and I first read it when I was about 16, 17, and I have reread it at least yearly since. This book is phenomenal and absolutely breathtaking. Nevernight by J. Kristoff. Now, the Nevernight Chronicles is an interesting and brilliant series. Yes, the first book is definitely not the strongest, and it's not the best written out of them, but definitely as the series goes on, the writing style changes. And some people switched off by the footnotes, but I like the footnotes. I like information like that in books. This is a stunning, bloody Assassin's Creed Renaissance-inspired fantasy that follows Mia in her kick for revenge. This got mislabeled as YA, and a lot of people put it into new adult just to justify them reading it. Nevernight Chronicles is a spectacular series and one definitely worth reading. It's one of those that will, again, pull you in. You won't be able to put this down. The characters, the intrigue, Mr. Kindly, the fact that this series is a series that is much loved as it's hated. This is a beautiful series and one definitely worth checking out. I mean, it's almost poetic. J. Kristoff is a very unique writer in that sense. He's very good at poetry and he's very good at soft, flowery language, but it never feels like purple poise. Nevernight has become one of my favourite fantasy series, even with the first book being the weakest. So that's Nevernight by J. Kristoff.